Okay, good morning, Revolution. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our weekly YouTube live broadcast from CPUSA. And we're here with Joe and Rosanna and Scott, and we've had a very
Morning.
Full week. Good morning, Revolution, everyone. And we have a lot to talk about today. A lot of up and down kind of things here, and we really want to start with the labor situation, which really was a near crisis this week. We got to the brink of a work stoppage of some sort in rail yesterday that could have been a catastrophe. But at the final hour, a tentative agreement was reached, and even though railroads cut 30% of their staff over the last 5 years or so, workers now have grueling schedules. And so, Rosanna, did you get a chance to think about or to read about the labor the solution that they have come up with for this, the tentative agreement, and what's involved
Yes,
in it?
I
What do you
I
think?
don't have all of the details. I know that they've gotten a salary raise and being able to take off without pay, without getting penalized, which was a big issue. I think what was key in my mind is that the if the railroad workers were to go out on strike, it would really show the power of workers and the leverage that we really have, and maybe that's what they were afraid of. On top of which, of course, it'll set the economy back and affect the whole economy, but it will really show the power of workers. And I think that's an important takeaway.
Hmm. Absolutely. Joe, do you think this strike represents some kind of a new development in labor? In what sense is it just like the old, labor strikes from, big industries of the past? And to what degree is this kind of a new situation in labor? How does it represent? Where does it fit in the big picture?
Well, the first thing I would say is to underscore the point that Rosanna just made. Anybody who doubts the power of the working class, or who's arguing that the working class is passe, or that its power comes from other sections of the society, just needs to take a look at the way business and government responded to the threat of that strike. Why they were running around, scared like a 2-year old who looked under the bed and saw a ghost. They were just frightened as can be because they were concerned that that strike would disrupt the supply chains and further harm the economy, which already is on the verge of a recession. It's on the verge of a recession. In fact, technically, it's already been a recession. So I think that's important. Second thing that I would say is that the workers are ready to strike. I mean, they know that the situation in the country is such that if we don't push our demands and get ready and willing to walk out, it's just going to be business as usual. And over the last several years, I think starting with the teacher strikes in 2018, 2019, there have been a series of successive strike waves. They haven't been huge, but they've been significant. Teachers, auto workers, grocery workers, so on and so forth. And this fits with that. And now in Starbucks and Amazon, in July, there were 56 strikes across the country involving 8,000 workers. We don't have the figures for August. And most of those took place in Starbucks, by the way. So I think it's a good thing. I think there's growing working class militancy, and that bodes well. But in order for that to be realized, we've got to pass the PRO Act, Anita, and that
Hmm.
means that Congress has to change, and in particular the Senate, so that workers have a greater opportunity and are not so restricted by labor law from engaging in collective bargaining. I think that's the main thing.
exactly. And we're looking forward to the midterms to get a configuration that will make that possible. So, Scott, speaking of government, it seems that the Biden administration really took a leading role in the 20-hour negotiations. Do you and you were contrasting that with previous administrations. What do you think this says about the Biden administration, and what was the motivation there? What do you think?
Well, that's a great question. So for me, the immediate point of contrast was the PATCO air traffic controllers strike in 1981, where Ronald Reagan, who had in the lead up in the election campaign, had presented himself as a friend of labor. In fact, as a union member of the Screen Actors Guild, had presented himself as a friend of the air traffic controllers. They went out on strike, and he said, "Nope, order them back to work and fire any that won't go back." And that's what happened. In fact, some of the leaders of that union were arrested, and that was a real turning point. It was a signal to the whole ruling class, the whole capitalist class, that they could now do basically whatever they wanted to employees. So strikes, which had been an average of something like 300 a year before 1981, plummeted and kept declining down to something like 16 a year in 2010. So that and now I think we're seeing the other end of that, right? So for people that push this idea that the two parties are the same, that they're both parties of the ruling class, doesn't matter which one is in power, that's manifestly false. There are real clear stakes. The involvement, the push of the Biden administration, even if it didn't propose a deal that was what the workers were asking for, was 180 degrees different.
Okay. Oh no, Scott, come back. Or is it me who's frozen? No, I guess it is Scott. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, Scott, I wish you could finish your thought. Are you there? Okay, well, we'll get back. I Scott?
I can hear you.
Yeah, you're not you're okay. Now try, because I think you're back.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want to finish your thought?
Just saying that going into the midterms, it's important to keep in mind that there are real stakes, very basic bread and butter stakes for the working class on all kinds of issues involved in going to the polls, and also that the Biden administration would not have taken the stance it did, would not have, moved in the direction of workers if it hadn't been for these strike waves that Joe mentioned. It wasn't out of nowhere that the administration took the side of workers. It was because they knew that they know where the power is. That's it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, speaking of bread and butter issues, I was going to ask you, Rosanna, we have in this strike a lot of attention to working conditions and time off and those kind of scheduling and that kind of issue. And I heard somebody say on the radio this morning that the new wave of labor is all about attention to working conditions, dignity of work, respect for workers, safety for workers, instead of these bread and butter issues. Do you think those issues are getting more important in our labor struggles, working conditions, work-life balance, those kind of things? And how do you think that's going to play out in the future?
Well, I think it's always been an issue. I think, dignity and being treated with respect, it comes with, getting fair wages, getting good health care, being able to take time off for your family, emergencies, your children, things like that. So I think it's just come more to the surface, but and being able to connect with the community at large, and being able to show the community that the support is not just the fight is not just about simply wages as it's portrayed in the form of greed, but by workers. But it's also all it's very encompassing, and I think those points are being made with this. So I think every worker has suffered being treated with this with this respect, not being allowed to go and see your family or take care of a sick loved one, things like that. We can all connect with those features because it's always been part of the exploitation of our workforce.
Exactly. They can't even take care of their sick selves. I mean, they couldn't even go to the doctor without, you know, risking being fired. So one last question, Joe. You've written on the struggle against fascism and the United Front against fascism. And I was thinking, since this is our fascism definition episode, um, I don't see, the big railroads, despicable capitalists and greedy people, though they may be, as the most reactionary elements of the ruling class. How do these struggles, union struggles, and labor struggles like the dock workers and the nurses too, how do they fit into the struggle for a united front against fascism?
I think that workers are angry. They're angry, Anita, at the gross inequality. In that railroad strike, one of the heads of one of the companies, a Canadian company, over the last, I think, 10 years, their salary was raised 920%. 920%. And the workers were asking for, 25% raise over 5 years. And they were getting, oh, that's so unreasonable. How can they, come on, come off of it. Come off of it. You guys are just, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. But they have no shame. That's the whole point. And they've got to be compelled. And big business has to be compelled. And that's why we feel that we need a popular front of the people, a people's front, but it has to have a working class orientation. Or as Scott likes to say, quoting Lenin, it has to have a working class stamp on it. Workers have to be involved in the leadership of it. And that's the point of departure for our position. You got to compel a cat like Trump. He's not. If you think about what's going on in his Florida home with those documents, that boy is going to go as far as he's permitted to go. And the only thing that's going to stop him is the force of government, the force of the people, the force of the courts and the law. Otherwise, we're going to have a catastrophe in this country. And working class people have to take the lead in the elaboration and definition and implementation of this front. And that's what the Communist Party stands for. That's what we're fighting for. And we're going to keep on fighting for it. And we're not going to stop. I don't care what nobody says.
Thank you. Great answer. And I mean, speaking of rolling back rights, we had a senator from South Carolina, Lindsey Graham. This week, he made news with his proposed national abortion bans, which would outlaw abortion after the 15th week, about 5 weeks before many fetal abnormalities are found, and he wouldn't roll back the states that have worse bans are still going to have bad bans. So, Scott, when you're making decisions about your health care, is the South Carolina senator the first person you turn to for making those decisions for you?
Surprisingly, he is not.
No.
When I think about my health, I consult, my doctor. I consult my wife. I consult, trusted people who may have gone through similar things. I don't think Lindsey Graham should be opening his mouth about people's health care, and especially not to claim that, the claim he has made is that his law would bring the U.S. into line with most of the nations of Europe in terms of abortion rights, which is completely false. So he's saying that banning abortion after 15 weeks would put us in line with, France and I'm not sure what other countries he mentioned, but France is the case that I know a little bit anyway. And it's true that abortions are heavily restricted after that point in France, but they're also subsidized and readily available before that point, which is a real difference. So it's not only that this prevents people from dealing with fetal abnormalities or and really tragic congenital deformities or whatever. It's also that it does nothing to protect abortion rights before 15 weeks. So it's completely ridiculous.
Exactly. Well, Rosanna, the ban actually wouldn't do anything in Ohio because we have a 6-week abortion ban, which actually we have a temporary stay on it right now. But it would be a restriction in California because California has a less restrictive policy right now. So if a ban like Lindsey Graham's went through, it would really affect California. And we just had a graphic up there that showed how popular support for abortion rights are across the country. And what do you think Californians? How would Californians react to have such a national law imposed on them? Do you think?
Well, I think, definitely we would stand up and fight back. Uh, I believe that there's already legislation in California to make abortion rights. I forget what that term is, but like permanent in the state of California. So I think an important point is to point out is how dare does a man make legislation for women that affect women? And I think that's what we also need to point out is that he has no right to be, and no other male legislator has any right to make any kind of a ruling about our bodies. No matter how we stand on abortion, no man has any right to make any decisions about how our body, what about to do with our bodies and stuff. And I think that's really important to point out.
Joe, Lindsey Graham introduced this obviously as a political act because he knows it's not going to go anywhere. So do you think he did his party a favor by introducing this idea and making a big show about it with his little press conference? Or what kind of effect do you think this is going to have with the midterms this
I
year?
think Lindsey Graham is a disgrace. And I think that the people of South Carolina need to do their job and get rid of him. And that brother who ran against him, he would have been a much, much better senator. I think, Anita, that the Supreme Court and with the Dobbs decision and with the Republicans with their trigger laws have put themselves in a complete, total mess with respect to the midterms. And do you know that in a Republican state in Kansas, when they put that law forward to ban abortion, it was defeated by 18 points, 18 in a Republican states. And voter registration, Anita, has been skyrocketing all across the country amongst men and women, but mainly amongst women. And they've been voting. And the trends in the primaries and in the special elections are going in the same direction. So I think that this indicates that in the midterms, there's going to be a massive vote to protect democracy and a woman's right to choose in particular, because democracy and choice is on the line in the midterms. And if the American people don't rise up now and defeat these backwards, feudal thinking and acting people, and Lindsey Graham, the big opportunist that he is chief amongst them in enabling and facilitating the fascist danger, we're going to be in real trouble. But I'm growing more and more confident that come November, we're going to have a very different result than what the pundits up until a month or two ago were predicting. And so I think that inadvertently, Lindsay, you did us a favor. And I hope that favor is going to result sooner or later, hopefully sooner, in your own personal defeat. Because your boy John McCain, who you were so chummy with, he's turning in his grave. And he was a reactionary son of a blankety blank himself. He was. You've just gone hog wild, as they say in South Carolina, you know. They need to put you in the pen with them pigs.
Wow, that's graphic.
Oh, it's
So
true.
that's true. I know. Well, I wanted to add what's going on in Ohio right now because it's so ironic. A lower court overturned our 6-week ban, so we're back to Roe v. Wade for a couple of weeks in Ohio right now. And the reason was because the judge found in our Constitution a provision that Ohio Republicans had insisted on putting there to hinder Obamacare. So during the Obamacare thing, the Republicans decided they were going to put something in that had to do with buying health care and the right to buy health care. And so a judge has decided we have our abortion ban lifted for a couple of weeks anyway, until they do the appeals and so forth. So it's kind of ironic. Okay, well, let's move on to, we were going to talk about immigration in some sense today. And Ron DeSantis, gave us a good start with his stunt. On Wednesday, he paid to fly 50 people from San Antonio, Texas, outside the state, to Martha's Vineyard. And then Greg Abbott in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott, took 2 buses of migrants and he dropped them off at Vice President Harris's home in Washington. By the way, 2 of those individuals had to be hospitalized because they had no care, no food, no care during this long bus ride from Texas, lying to the people about where they were going. So, Rosanna, what do you think the point of DeSantis's stunt and Abbott's stunts were, and who was it supposed to appeal to? And do you think he achieved his purpose, or they achieved their purposes?
Well, first of all, I think it's really despicable to use human life that way. They talk about the unborn fetus and things like that, but then they go around treating humans in as if they're cargo or political pawns and things like that. I think it's very disgusting. I'm thinking that the motivation is to begin to build this anti-immigrant sentiment, which is used, it's being used throughout the world, really, of getting people to side with the right wing, fascist minded people, politicians. And I think we have to be very careful that we don't fall prey to that kind of rhetoric or those types of lies. I think it's, for me right now, it's my stomach turns at the thought of human beings being treated and hauled around like that. It's just really disgusting.
It is. Joe, the vast majority of agricultural workers in DeSantis's home state are actually immigrants from Mexico and Central America. So Does he really want to stop labor from crossing borders? And why is it that capital can go wherever it wants and labor is so restricted?
Because we live in a bourgeois world and they feel like they can do whatever they want to do because they control the playing field. But what these governors did, Rosanna is right, it's despicable, it's inhuman, it's racist, it's fascist, it's a ploy and a device. What they're trying to do, Anita, they're trying to flip the script. They want to take the conversation off of abortion rights and appeal to racism and chauvinism and hatred in order to galvanize their vote, you know? But it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not. Your time is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, somebody made a point the other day with respect to these so-called Republicans. They need to start resigning in Texas. How can you be a decent human being and participate in that state government? And the same thing is true in Florida, you know? They need to stand up, follow the example of a despicable person like William Barr and the rest of them, you know? Come on, you know? And the people of Texas and Florida need to rise up and put pressure on them, you know? Uh, without that, without public mass pressure, they're going to continue with this kind of activity. And again, it's up to us to make it happen. And so I hope that the party in Florida is listening, and I hope that the party in Texas is listening, and I hope that our friends and other organizations and movements are listening. And let's take some action. Let's do something dramatic to make a change. Sit in, occupy, do whatever you can. You know, strike to prevent this kind of. You know, it's fascist what they did to those people, sending them all over like cargo. Rosanna's right. You know, like cattle. In fact, they probably treat cattle better. No, it's got to stop.
Yeah. So, Scott, do you think I know what's going on here seems to reflect what's going on in Europe too. I mean, immigration seems to be they're ginning up the immigration struggle there too. Do you think it will? Do you think it's parallel what's going on here with what's going on in? I know you're more familiar with some of the places in Europe.
In many ways, I think there are a lot of parallels. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, the ruling class is international, um, uh, even though there are, you know, national divisions, and the crisis of immigration, the crisis of borders, as it's sometimes called, is um, it's an attempt by the ruling class to lock out the consequences of its actions. You know, the ruling class has aggressively pursued policies that have destabilized huge portions of the world, that have locked them in chronic underdevelopment, that have, you know, overthrown governments, produced huge numbers of refugees, and now they're trying to wall off their privileged little section of the world from the consequences of those actions. And it's not going to work. It can't work. And it has, as Rosanna mentioned, a terrifically high human cost. It has a political cost for all of us, because the way you do that is by bringing the extreme right to power and enforcing these draconian border regulations that always come with attacks on the rights of native-born people of various strata and, as well. So this is everyone has a stake in the fight for the rights and the dignity of immigrants. It's part and parcel of the whole struggle for democracy and equality. And you know, I think people in Europe are beginning to see that. as the far right is coming to power in more and more places in Italy, new role for it in the legislature in France, in Sweden, where I imagine all of the pressure that the U.S. put on Sweden to join NATO probably resulted in, probably contributed to the victory of the right wing there. So yeah, this is a worldwide problem, and it requires a worldwide coordinated working class solution.
All right. Well, we're coming to a close, but I know we had I wanted to ask Joe about the upcoming national committee meeting, and a question that came up. I know you said a question came up in the Little Red Schoolhouse. Could you tell us about the NC and this definition of fascism question, Joe?
Well, in 2 days on Sunday, the National Committee of the Party is going to meet, and that's our big policy decision making meeting. And we are going to be focused almost exclusively on two things: defeating the fascist element, the MAGA movement. I always call it magma because it's like hot, molten lava coming out of the ground, burning down everything in its path. We're going to focus on that and building the party. Maggot movement. You're right, Anita. Maggot. Defeating the far right and fascist and building the party. Those are at the top of our agenda. And the party's growing like nobody. Do you know that over the last 5,000 people joined the party, which compares to 3,000 in the period just before that, So we're growing like nobody's business, and that's a good thing. And next year we want to double that. There is a conversation taking place in our circles and outside of what is fascism? And does the old definition, fascism is defined by the dictatorship of the most reactionary sections of finance capital. That was Dimitrov's definition at the 7th Congress of the Communist International back in 1937. But the world has changed since then, a lot. And there have been many different forms of dictatorship that have occurred. There was Stroessner, where was that? Paraguay? And there was Salazar in Portugal. And there was Mobutu in Zaire, and Baby Doc and Papa Doc in Haiti, and so on and so forth. And is all of that fascist? In my opinion, you have to make a distinction between authoritarianism and fascism as classically defined. And here's why. Fascism developed in Europe, and it developed as an extreme form of nationalism defined by anti-Semitism and racism, anti-Black, anti-Latino, anti-Roma, racism, and it manifested itself in genocide, in the extermination of whole peoples, and as horrible as Mobutu's regime was in Zaire, or Baby Doc in Haiti, you didn't have that kind of genocidal impulse. And so what we're dealing with is a specific form of rule that developed under capitalism, that emerged in its highest stage, imperialism, that seeks to maintain its rule by any means necessary, including dictatorship, accompanied by genocide. And that's why, and that's the danger that we have presented by the MAGA movement and Trump. It is authoritarian rule aided and abetted by racism and anti-immigrant hatred, and anti-black hatred, and anti-women, hatred, and anti-LGBTQ. Really, I mean, that's what is driving this. And so I think that while we need to update our analysis, we can't forget about its origins and the danger that still poses.
All right. Well, that I think Rosanna and Scott may also want to contribute to. Do we need a new definition of fascism, or are we? Rosanna, do you want to have a quick answer to that?
Well, I agree with Joe. I think, we need to make an analysis. I agree with his remarks on that. So I think we always have to be making an analysis. It's all about the
Exactly.
strategic moment. What's necessary, what's doable. We always know what we would like to have, but we also have to keep in mind what is doable and be very
Mhm.
realistic. Even if we don't like our reality, we have to be very realistic. Otherwise, we will not have an impact. So analysis, strategic thinking are key to anything that we're dealing with at the moment in time.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Do you want to have the last word on? Do we need a new
I
definition of
can give it.
fascism?
I can give it a try.
Be
What we
adaptable.
have to do is make sure that um, while bourgeois definitions may capture some of what fascism is, ours insists on the class nature of it and on its roots in capitalism. That's primary. We have to keep that at the forefront. And as we've said over and over again, we have to keep up the fight for working class leadership in the response to fascism. This is a capitalist problem, and it requires a working class solution.
Exactly. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the remarks on Sunday at the National Committee meeting, and then probably reading them on the cpusa.org and in the PW in the future. So thank you, Joe, Rosanna, and Scott, and to our producers as well. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same station, right?
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.